and welcome everyone in this very important session, the valedictory session of 4-day International Conference on Eradication of Biological and Chemical Weapons under the aegis of MIT World Peace University, Pune, and organized by MIT School of Government, Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad Foundation, and supported by UNESCO Chair. My friends, it is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome all of you for this important valedictory session of this conference. I was just sharing with some of my colleagues that it has been 4 days. I mean, when it always happens with you that when you are about to begin, you feel that, oh, it's a big, long 4-day conference. And today we are standing on 26th of June in the valedictory session of the conference. And it has been such a wonderful and fascinating journey that we don't even feel that it has been 4 days already. It feels that we should go on with a couple of more discussions. The session would be themed around the legal framework for implementing Chemical Weapon Convention and Biological Weapon Convention. It is indeed a very important discussion for which we have been joined by the Honorable Vice Chancellor of MIT World Peace University, Dr. N.T. Rao, sir. Welcome, sir. We also have with us the beloved founder of MIT World Peace University, UNESCO chairholder, Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad, sir. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much for joining in. We also have the former Advocate General of Madhya Pradesh, the chief guest of this function, this session, Advocate Anand Mathurji. Thank you very much, sir, for joining in. We have the guest of honor of this particular session, Group Captain Dr. Ajay Lele, Senior Fellow, Head of Center on Strategic Technologies. Thank you very much, sir, for joining in. We also have as the guest of honor of the Professor of International Law from University of Illinois, Professor Francis A. Boyle. Thank you very much, sir, for joining in. We would be having soon with us the guest of honor of this session, Dr. Rajendra Shende, the Chairman of TERRE Policy Center and the former Diplomat of United Nations, India. Thank you very much, sir, for joining. We would also be having the guest of honor. We already have with us the guest of honor of this function, Colonel G.H.R. Naidu, veteran chief consultant at CBRNE, Secure India, and former chief of CW Inspector. Thank you very much, sir, for joining in. And now, with the permission of Chair, I would like to begin this session. But before we do so, I would like to request the moderator of this particular session, Sri Darshan Mundalaji, to kindly open the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just a minute, I'm trying to share my screen. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It's been a pleasure for me to be part of this conference. I'm a former student of MIT, and a better introduction is that I'm a personal student of our founder, revered Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad, sir. And it was through one of the interactions with him that we conceptualized this conference. Many of you came back in last 4 days asking why this and how this. And I had shared this story at the start, but I would like to take a quick moment to draw your attention to two aspects. It was during this lockdown that revered Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad, sir, thought of larger questions. When many of us are struggling with smaller questions of day-to-day aspects, here there is someone who is thinking of a much larger question that we as humanity were facing. And it was through that larger question of where we are headed as world, where is our well-being as humanity, that sir addressed a letter to UN Secretary General and to the Security Council, asking them to implement a complete and total ban and eradication of biological and chemical weapons. Like father, like son, came in the executive president of MIT Group, Mr. Rahul Karad, and he said it's not only about addressing that letter at that top level, but we really need to build a movement of students. Everyone needs to understand the depth of this topic. Everyone needs to understand why this problem and why this has to be dealt. And that is what led to conceptualization of this conference. As I had shared with you on the first day, we were going to look at 3 critical aspects of why this problem, what is the solution, and how are we going to achieve it, and how the future would look like. So over the last 4 days, as we just heard from Professor Bapat, we've had about 4 sessions each day, or 3 sessions each day, total 12 sessions. And we addressed the why problem through 4 of these sessions, where we understood the 5 Ws of the biological and chemical warfare. We also understood our response to pandemics and how we should prepare. We understood the whole aspect of, is this an enemy that we can visualize? Is this an invisible enemy, and how do we deal with it? And we heard some real life stories, which really kind of took us to next level. I'm not going to read each and every quote on the slide for want of time, but I just wanted to bring to you the kind of speakers we had and the kind of powerful quotes we had in last 4 days. Then we went on to understand what was the intent of this conference and what is it that was needed to be done. Really looking at, okay, what about the research of biological and chemical weapons? Is it really required? Is it going to be helpful, not helpful? How do we redefine the defense doctrine? And what exactly was COVID-19 and what has it made us realize? The key takeaways there were also amazing. We had speakers like Mr. Andrew Weber, former Undersecretary to the Obama administration. We had academics. We had from someone from Tibetan administration, Mr. Lobsang Sangye. So the idea was we have had a variety of speakers bringing to us the perspectives, various perspectives to biological and chemical weapons, which we wouldn't have been acquainted to otherwise. And finally, we looked today at how the way forward, how universities can contribute, how we can contribute, how do we recalibrate the SDGs, and how do we reset our priorities, especially by the youth. The key takeaways for that, again, have been some incredible discussions today. We focused from environment to sustainability to youth activism to education systems. So this will just give you this plethora of discussions that we've had and the depth we've been able to achieve. What has been the impact? Many of you ask, where do we go from here? The impact is the petition that's ongoing on change.org by the MIT World Peace University, a world free of biological and chemical weapons. I once again invite you to sign this petition. The link to the petition is given at the bottom. Later on, I'll be posting this in the chat, and please go ahead and sign this petition and spread it between your friends and family. What have been the key highlights of these 4 days? We've spent more than 18 hours, 40 minutes discussing and deliberating. We've had more than 6,000 participants, totally 40 speakers, and we casted more than 4,500 votes towards 10 very strong resolutions that we'll be sharing once again today. Finally, while I end, once again to remind you, our goalpost has been the clarion call which was given by revered Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad sir to UN and the Security Council members, demanding a complete ban and total disarmament of biological and chemical weapons, alongside stoppage of any further research and development activities. Also, an urgent call to a special meeting by the UN Security Council, of which India is now a non-permanent member. We are really looking at these two goal members, and beyond this conference, we will be chasing this agenda as MIT World Peace University and hopefully take it to its logical conclusion. Having said that, I would like to conclude with the words from Yajurved. We all have known this prayer. At MIT especially, we've known this prayer, but it's a time for us to understand the meaning. The meaning is, may the heavens be at peace, may the sky be at peace, may the earth be at peace, peace to the water, peace to the nature. May the gods be at peace, peace unto the creator, and may we humans realize that peace. I think that's the mission that MIT World Peace University has embarked on, of passing the message of peace to every human being. And this was one step towards our larger goal. So thank you for being with us for last 4 days. And finally, thank you everyone involved in this journey for making this conference a big success. Thank you. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you.
Bapat.
Thank you very much, Darshanji. Thank you very much for those wonderful words. And indeed, as you said, the Chanti mantra that you shared in your last slide, definitely, it is definitely, I feel it's been a blessing of everyone at MIT World Peace University that our beloved founder taught us the importance of Shanti mantra and gave it to us through the World Peace Prayer that we all have been reciting for the last 4 decades. Thank you very much for bringing that onto the table, and thank you very much for once again reiterating the importance of peace. And I would like to take this cue and take the entire audience along with the panelists to this prayer that we have been reciting for the last 4 decades, which is a gift of our beloved founder, Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karatsa. I request everyone in the audience, in the panel, if they could please join to their hearts in this world peace prayer. I would like request everyone to close their eyes, bring the image of their deity, their beloved parents in front of their eyes, and please, with your whole heart, join us for this world peace prayer. I request my technical team if they could please relay the world peace prayer.
प्रतिपाद्या जय जय स्वसंवेद्या आत्मरूपा देवातुति गणेषु सकलार्थमतिप्रकाशु म्हणे निवृत्तिदासु अवधारि गोधी गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you all must have experienced the moment of peace within your hearts, which I was sharing with you. And it is indeed time in this session that we all join in for the digital picture perfect moment, for which I would like to request everyone in the panel to please switch on their cameras. If you could please switch on your cameras, we would be able to take I would say screenshot, because photograph, the way of taking photograph in this conference has been a little different than the way we do it traditionally. So I request everyone to please wear a sweet smile on their faces so that we can capture this picture perfect moment. I hope everyone in the panel has switched on their cameras. Thank you. I request my technical team to go ahead and capture this moment.
Done, sir.
Done. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. And now it's time that I proceed in this very, very important session. And of course, for the opening and welcome address, I have to invite no one else but the Honorable Vice Chancellor of MIT World Peace University, Dr. N.T. Rao, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gautam. My greetings to everyone. I consider it as a privilege that I am welcoming all of you this evening for the valedictory function. The fact that we thought about having a 4-day conference, trying to propose something to the United Nations, aiming at bringing peace, itself shows how committed we are to the world peace. I would go to the very genesis that we named our university as World Peace University. Our beloved founder, Reverend Vishwanath Karatsa, so he wanted the peace in the world. Unlike others who think that, yes, let's discuss how peace can be brought about, he feels that peace has to be a way of life. So on that count alone, that very thought of our revered President, Professor Vishwanath Karatsa, itself is so laudable. It is a way of life for us. Peace is way of life for us. It is there in our name, World Peace University, Vishwa Shanti Vishwa Vidyalaya. So by naming itself, we thought we should bring the peace. Is it just there in the name? No, it goes much more than that, much beyond that. Just to give an example, for those who are not part of this university, we have peace studies as a faculty where every single student goes through peace as a subject. He or she studies this subject. So why? Why do we need to study? Because the world thinks that we need to bring in peace after some event has taken place. Maybe after the war, maybe after an outbreak of an Ebola, or maybe after an outbreak of COVID. For us, we see much more than that, much beyond that. Should the people be working for peace? Why do we assume that everybody knows about peace and what is peace? Should we not be teaching it as their children? Why can't we inculcate the concept of peace in the minds of people right when they are young? So it's not that something they react to an incident, violent incident, or violent outbreak, or violent war. No, it's not a reaction. It is an action itself. So we are proactive towards working for world peace. So on that count itself, I feel that World Peace University has been doing an immense service to the world and world peace. I don't think any other organization in the world is trying to drive the fact that one should be peace with himself first as an individual, and then contribute to the societal peace, and then to the world peace. So that is a very DNA of our university. So with that, which is there inbuilt in our DNA, well, what I mean to say is like it is there with every one of us. Peace is there with all of us because we are all part of Vishwa Shanti Vidyalaya of Sri Vishwanath Karad sir. So since we are part of that peace mission, peace as a habit, peace is a habit for us. It's not something we need to act or react. So as a habit, we do this. And as a habit, we decided, let's show the world how it can be done. We brought in great minds, and these great minds included scientists, vice chancellors, governors, members of parliament, former ministers, and every sphere of life, people did come on this platform and appeal. It's not that only the university or say somebody is telling, let's bring in peace. The whole section of people, including across the world, people did participate. That means everybody wants peace. Everybody said, yes, let's bring in peace. We are happy that we could bring people from across the world, around the country, every section, to plead to the United Nations, let's work towards eradication and chemical and biological weapons. So that in itself, I would say, is a great achievement. Fact that 5,000 of the 6,000 registered people have participated in this event, going into right from morning 2 o'clock to evening 8 o'clock. It's a reflection. It's a testimony. It's a authoritative statement. Yes, we want peace. Everybody stands with World Peace University to demand peace from the United Nations. So I take really pride in the fact that we did this event to showcase to the world. We have to bring in peace to the world. And I really thank our revered founder president, Professor Vishwanath Karad sir, for giving us an opportunity to come and discuss on this platform and bringing so many people to us. And also Professor Rahul Karad sir, who was instrumental in getting this organized in a global platform. Having said this, I would just conclude by saying, Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, that's it. It's there in our prayers. It's there in our daily life. It's there in our daily routine. It's part of our life. So, Shanti to the world. Peace be there to the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your kind words. Thank you very much for reiterating what gift, what wisdom, what way our beloved founder, Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad sir, has shown us Thank you, Mundaraji, also for quoting the same wisdom that has been shared by Sir. And now it is indeed my honor and privilege to invite him, the founder president of MIT World Peace University, the founder executive president of World Peace Center, Miles MIT Group of Institutions, the UNESCO chairholder, Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad, sir, and I would request him to share the future roadmap and vision of this conference. Over to you, sir.
My learned friends, I am really grateful to all the speakers, the learned scholars, thinkers, and philosophers who have spoken on this platform of this 4-day international conference on the very pertinent subject of today's relevance on the background of particularly the coronavirus, the COVID-19 epidemic, which has created a horrifying situation world over. And naturally, the entire world seems to be highly worried. And we, as an educational institution, called as MIT World Peace University, on behalf of this MIT School of Government, Mr. Rahul Karat, Darshan Mandula, Group Captain Apte, Bapat, and many others, they have taken trouble to organize this 4-day conference on this very relevant issue of eradication of biological and chemical weapons, or the eradication of the horrifying other mass destructive weapons too. The main subject has been the horrifying situation created by the coronavirus, and particularly it has created a situation which has made the whole world, including all the powerful nations like America, China, Russia, France, Britain, Spain, whatever names you take, including India, and the entire world seems to be under lockdown, feeling horrified because of the problems which you know it very well. Hundreds of thousands of people dying, and that too in the countries like America, in the countries like France and Britain, and many other countries, including China and India too. I felt it is our duty, really speaking. I'm not to say anything very long, but I'm tempted to read out my own speech about education itself, because what is the solution is the main issue. And whether who can take the decision to eradicate these weapons like biological or chemical weapons. The research which is being taken under that name of the development and promotion of some such weapons which they need for their own personal security. I really, because it was in the year 1996 possibly, I'm just trying to read out one small paragraph which is in front of me, which really has made me progress from this very whole mission of what our institution stands for. Friends, it says, you are all aware that the entire world is passing through a tense and chaotic stage, even worse than what was experienced during 2 world wars. The present one is also a war between good and evil, sacrifice and greed, virtues and vices, tolerance and stubbornness, religious coexistence and fundamentalism, traditional time-tested values and quick gains, ego, and so on, and the greed of power and the lust, the horrifying arrogance and the ego which is possessed by the great leaders of the world. The various issues involved are not only just local and restricted to one's own country, but are global as well. The world is witnessing on one side the most mind-boggling scientific and industrial developments like artificial intelligence, internet, IT, nanotechnology, the Google, the journey to the outer space, and whatnot on the one hand, while on the other hand, there is a total chaos, confusion, terrorism, bloodshed, and massacre in the name of some caste, creed, race, religion, and the most trivial issues like the boundaries of nations. It is most unfortunate, friends, that in spite of these amazing and wonderful developments for all possible enjoyments and pleasure on the one side, leading for the luxurious life, for the welfare of the mankind, the family system, which is very vital for our survival, is on the rocks and certainly deteriorating rapidly because of the decline in mutual faith, affection, true love, loyalty, and the trust, mutual trust, neglecting their religious duty towards each other, which is the very fundamental and foundation of the ideal family system itself. The industrialized society should have helped in preserving the human values apart from providing the materialistic gains and achieve sustainable development. But even though the present scientific innovations and discoveries have drifted our hearts and minds apart, and that is a real problem, and development of a positive mindset, understanding our responsibility and duty, there's a long story behind. Friends, I can only say that after discussing for 4 days, I have been fortunate enough to listen to almost all the speakers. For the last 3 days, I have been sitting here and trying to understand what is the mindset of the people. And I have heard very learned scholars and thinkers and philosophers. Everyone feels that yes, something has to be done. Now, who is to do it and who has the authority to make some decisions? I, for one, I sincerely feel I spoke to Mr. Milind Pandey, Darshan Mundra, Bapat, and Apte too, that please have at least a concluding remarks would be that we pass a declaration of Pune Declaration on this international issue. We are two small people. We are like educationists, like teachers or ordinary students. But this students' body, the Indian Students' Parliament especially, which is being led by Mr. Rahul Karad and Darshan and many other people and Apte, I would certainly request them that we should pass a very special resolution, a Pune Declaration, even though I don't know whether this is going to function, whether in the present situation, who are the people who is going to take care of it or listen to it. We are not the authority like a prime minister or a president of some country, but we would like to make an earnest appeal and a request to those who are heading at the United Nations. I said to Darshan Mundra too, or the Mr. Apte and Milind Pandey, that let us pass a special resolution and at least invite, make a clarion call to the United Nations and especially to members of the Security Council, who are the most powerful, who have been more involved in the power game. They are involved in the rat race, possibly for development of the nuclear weapons, the atomic weapons, and also the chemical weapons and the biological weapons. And you know it, friends, I said in the morning to somebody that possibly we are sitting on a ticking bomb, which any time can trigger and destroy this entire Mother Earth. It will be a very horrifying situation. Of course, we hope and expect that possibly the things which are being said by the world over, the very learned people, that the humanity may not have a chance to see the end of 21st century if something goes like wrong like this. And it's this mad race or the rat race which is going on for power and the supremacy is going to really harm the entire humanity. And for the first time in the human history, the situation what we are experiencing is very horrifying. So my personal request would be, and a suggestion to the Students' Parliament, the body of not only the Indian Students' Parliament, but the World Parliament of Students. I think we should certainly think about at least sending a letter, a Pune Declaration and a letter of appeal to the United Nations, and especially to all the Security Council members, all those states, that they should convene a special meeting of the Security Council members, some member states, and the World Health Organization together. Maybe an historic meeting of calling both of them together on one common platform. And please try to convince the people that this is going to ruin themselves This is going to cause a tremendous harm and a whole of devastation to the whole of human race. So can we think of the future? And it's for the youngsters, please, friends, remember that you are going to the people. You are not going to excuse us if we make a mistake. At least we will try to sincerely appeal to the people and accordingly having some declaration like this, and possibly we may have some other suggestions too. But these letters, I am again trying to show it to you that this very book which I have showed to you on behalf of the World Peace University, I have decided that this book I show it to you once again. The bell of Hiroshima, ringing once again to give a clarion call or be aware of this horrifying danger. I need not tell you much, but I have decided from my institution. This was done by Mr. B.D. Kher long back, but I don't know, the Honorable former then President Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam ji was there to bless this occasion. But this book, along with the Secrets of the Universal Secrets of Sadhaneshwara, these two books, whether they will read it or not, I don't know. But I have at least taken a decision that I'll send these books to all the Security Council members, all the heads of the states, and possibly the prime ministers of including America, the China, the Russia, everybody, and let them give a at least appeal that please think it over very seriously. And as a human beings, you have a responsibility, you have an accountability. And when you say Security Council, you are to give a security of the life and the property to the people of the whole world. And possibly what is the meaning of the Security Council itself. But let me tell you, friend, these two books will be sending along with your resolution and to our own Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi ji, because he has taken up the lead now. It is India's role now, let me tell you, friend. I sincerely feel that this coronavirus or the COVID-19 has given a different signal. I have been telling you that this signal has at least made us realize that the world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is one word which has been spoken about 5,000-10,000 years back, but possibly that has been the real signal, that has been the real message. And possibly this COVID-19 has made at least one command and made the entire 160, 170 nations completely closed down, locked down. So this has been at least making it realize and understand, and if possible, recognize or reveal the very principle, very conscious principle. I'd like to make a mention to you, friends, that MIT, as Dr. Penrose has said, MIT has taken a decision for the last session itself that we are establishing a MIT School of Consciousness, the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, the very purpose of life. This is a very, very logical, philosophical, scientific, spiritual discussion, which I don't want to elaborate much, but I have an appeal that I know my limitation. I'm not somebody great authority of some world or the community or the nation, but I'm just heading as a teacher of this World Peace University. And I'm requesting you, the students, especially the parliament students of MIT or the Indian students of parliament, and Mr. Rahul, Mr. Darshan, Apte, you take a lead, try it from the bottom of heart, and let the success be left to them. But I have a great hope. I am having a great hope and expectation that it will bring some change, because this signal has been very horrifying given by COVID-19. And let Mr. Narendra Modi ji, who has a vision, who has understanding that India has a role to play, and India has to take the initiative and a lead. And on behalf of India, Narendra Modi ji has a role to play. And if he takes it, possibly the usual mission which I have been talking about for the last 30 years, I think possibly in the 21st century, India will emerge as a Vishwaguru or a guide for the whole of the human race. That's my personal feeling, friends. I think today I can see here Rajendra, Shende ji, and then many other people who is the chief guest of today's function. I'm meeting him for the first time, but I have a pleasure that I can see a very number of people who have been very learned, scholarly people. Their views are important, but please give us the guidance. Please show us the pathway. And I think that the whole human race has been little confused. Very powerful people, very wealthy people, the rich or the poorest of the poor, they are passing through the same tunnel, same channel. So let's try to find out some way out. And that's my personal appeal to you. Just an advice and a little bit of satisfaction. And yes, we are actually doing our duty. Dharma. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for letting us know your views. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom. My friends, as sir rightly said, that yes, the bell is ringing and we all have to be alert and we all will have to play our own small role to make this cause reality. My friends, now it's time that I take this session forward with our chief guest of the session, Advocate Anand Mathurji. But before I invite him to speak, let me introduce him to all of you. Advocate Anand Mohan Mathurji has served as the Advocate General of Madhya Pradesh. He is the Executive Board Chairman, Center for Environmental Protection Research and Development. From being a factory worker to Advocate General of the state, covering his struggle during the emergency, anecdotes about the former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao and a few former Chief Ministers of Madhya Pradesh's efforts towards setting up various organizations in Indore, and all of above his commendable role in getting success of the justice for victim for Bhopal gas tragedy, among other interesting issues, has been commendable. Sir, it is indeed our honor and privilege that you are here with us today in this session as the chief guest of this session. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for joining in. And without taking much time, I hand over the control to you. Over to you, sir.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Honorable all other speakers, eminent speakers who have come here, and Professor Karar, especially I thank the entire team which is working, the sponsors, the organizers, and various ladies and gentlemen. This is an occasion. Thank you, sir. Now today, I may say in one word that the world is sitting over a volcano. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bells are ringing. The bells of COVID-19 are also ringing. Now, the alternative is between life and death. It is between existence on this world or a grave. We have seen the two world wars, the World War First and the World War Second. In the World War First, the chemical weapons were used by Germans first, the chlorine gas and the clouds that came out of it and the mortalities which it generated. Besides that, the Britishers also used the phosgene gas also. Others like France, they also used this gas. Russians were also victims of it. Now that's about, you see the gases. And then you see the other warfare which is more fatal and which is more dreadful is the biological warfare. Now you see the forces of two sides may fight. They are fighting each other face to face. But by this biological warfare, those poor people, their aged parents, their families, their children, they are all being destroyed from this world by this biological warfare. The biological warfare uses the various germs, the various viruses, and it brings in plague, smallpox, anthrax, ricin, anta, grinders, so many dangerous diseases and epidemic diseases. These germs they give rise to. Now in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, there was destruction of 2 cities, but the biological warfare takes in the toll not only in 2 cities or 4 cities, it takes a toll of the whole world. We have seen that Russia, USSR were disintegrated. Were integrated because of the economics. That was economic policies that were followed by the Soviet. So on account of economic policies, that the Soviet Union. But this virus, which is corona, which is now the epidemic, which is spreading all over the world, people are dying, you see. I mean, in minutes, their, you see, lungs, they are getting deteriorated and they are dying. Now, I have not seen in my life, I am 93 years old now, but I have not seen railways ever stopping. I have never seen the High Court stopping or the Supreme Court stopping. This is the first time this is happening in the world that the courts have been stopped, locked for 3 months, 4 months. Now 3 months have passed that the courts are locked, they are locked. Now, you see, everybody is so fearful, dreadful, that if you go on the street, you will find everybody will have a cloth over his, if not anything else, then a cloth over his mouth. People are not going where the death take place. People are not going where you see the marriage take place. People are not going, you see, to the cremation ground or the burial ground, they are not going. Now, this is the situation which is created by a virus which has taken the toll of the entire world. In America, lakhs of people are suffering from this, and more than a lakh have died. You find in Italy, you find in Spain, you find in France, you find in Britain, in every part, whether it's Africa or Asia or any part, Australia or New Zealand or any part of the world, the people are, as a matter of fact, dying today without there being any fault of theirs. When a young child is born, he hopes for a world that we will see how he goes up, how he sees the sunrise, how he sees the sunset. But this virus has spread in the world so much that children alike, old men alike, families alike, they are all dying. Therefore, this has to be taken very seriously, and I propose a legal framework for implementing this, which is as below. The convention of all members of the UN Assembly be called, particularly those who are possessing chemical and biological weapons, and they should be presided over the President of the UN Assembly. And the proceeding should be conducted by the Secretary General of the UN or some other Assistant or Deputy Secretary General. The convention should appoint 2 Secretary Generals, and the 2 Secretary Generals must, they have in charge one CWC and another BWC. There should be a staff including Assistant Secretary Generals, and there should be a Joint Secretary General who should coordinate all this. Each Secretary General should look after the work of the CDC, CWC, and BWC. There should be one secretariat with 2 sections, each of CDC, CWC, and BWC, with a joint Secretary General. Each nation should sign a joint memorandum pledging to inform the Secretariat with details and affidavits of different Secretary of State, vouchsafing the details of possession and collection of CWC and BWC or both. The convention will appoint 2 inspection teams, each headed by each Secretary General and members elected by convention to visit and inspect the collection and preparation of CWC or BWC or both. The member of the state who is being inspected should be a necessary party. The inspection records with signature of the Secretary General and members should be kept with 2 copies in each section of the Secretariat. The meeting of the convention should be arranged twice a year, and the inspection reports of the inspection done in each 6 months shall be placed before for inspection before all the members of the convention. Each state shall sign a treaty not to use either CWC or BWC in case of any conflict between any state or between a state and state. If the convention decides the destruction of one or more CWC or BWC, the state is bound to comply. In case of any dispute about destruction and its full compliance shall be made to a bench of the 5 judges of the International Court, who will pass such interim or final orders as they deem fit along with costs. The compliance shall be done by a team of members consisting of contingent comprising from the permanent members of the Security Council. Against this, an appeal shall lie to the full court of the International Court, whose decision shall be final. These are my suggestions as far as the legal framework for implementing the CWC and BWC. I really thank everybody who participated in the conference, the speakers as well as participants, and who have done a wonderful work. And there can be no other time when there should be a clarion call for peace than this time, when the whole world is suffering. The poor laborers have no work, they have no wages, and the traders have no trade, no business. The factories are not working. Schools for the last 3 months or 4 months, they are stopped. There is no education. Even the health only, corona is there, other diseases are not looked after. So public health is suffering, education is suffering, agriculture is suffering. Every sector of the entire world is suffering. In such a situation, it is very necessary. And I really thank the Vice Chancellor, I thank Professor Karar, I thank you all also who are attending this conference and who are looking after the conference. And I thank you very much for such an opportunity which is given to me by you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Anand Mathurji. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom.
I have given my suggestions to you. I hope these are the legal framework which I have thought about it. You can
definitely, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that.
I am also one of the participants of the Pune Convention, Pune Declaration. It should be made.
Yes. I fully support this. I fully support Mr. Bapat. Everybody should take care of this, that whatever suggestions has been made by Mr. Thapar, I think it should be taken absolutely in the absolute manner, and we should make it as a part and parcel of the Pune Declaration.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Very appropriate. Very appropriate suggestion. I'm grateful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your valued inputs. And as our beloved founder, Prof. Dr. Vishwanath Karatsa said, we would definitely be adopting all of them as they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I would like to move ahead with our guest of honor of this session. It is indeed my honor and privilege to introduce you to the group captain, Dr. Ajay Lele ji. Group Captain Dr. Ajay Lele is the Senior Fellow in the Manohar Parikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis and heads its Center on Strategic Technologies. He has Master's degree in Physics from Pune University and Master's in and MPhil degrees in Defense and Strategic Studies from Madras University. He has done his doctorate from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. His specific areas of research include issues related to weapons of mass destruction, space security, and strategic technologies. He has contributed articles to various national and international journals, websites, and newspapers. He has authored 6 books and has also been an editor to 6 books. He is the recipient of K. Subramaniam Award, and which has conferred on for outstanding contribution in the area of strategic and security studies. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for joining in today. And without taking any much time, I hand over the control to you. Thank you, sir. So your mic is mute. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an indeed pleasure to talk to you people, if not directly, but digitally. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for inviting me for this important event. In fact, let me start with a very biased opinion. More than 3 decades back, I used to stay in Pune, but still that person from Pune is still residing inside me. And such out-of-box thinking, Pune Declaration can only come from Pune. And I'm very sure about it. This Pune Declaration will go way ahead and it will have a greater impact on the world peace, particularly at the level of United Nations. Well, ladies and gentlemen, last 4 days, many things must have already been said. I was seeing your conference on and off on the internet, and I found very stimulating lectures which have been given by many renowned people. The task in front of me for this particular session has been to look at the various legal aspects as far as chemical and biological weapons are concerned. To be very honest, I am not a lawyer, so I do not have much of an idea of the legal systems per se. But what I intend to bring out is that the entire formulation of the legal architecture, which has been existing as far as biological and chemical weapons are there for quite some time now. If you go back to the history of looking at the legal architecture as far as the issues concerning biological or chemical weapons is concerned, you'll be surprised to know that there are certain references way back in 1960s onwards. More than that, if you see how the evolution of these ideas have come up, one can say that there was a Brussels Declaration in 18, if I'm not wrong, 1874. This was followed by a declaration in Hague also. This declaration was about the issues which today we can say were related to chemical and biological weapons, because in those days, basically these weapons were known as poisonous weapons, and the entire debate and discourse was revolving around these poisonous weapons. As it was informed by my earlier speaker, the First World War actually saw a lot amount of the usage of the chemical weapons. In fact, just a year back, we completed 100 years of the First World War. And at that point in time, there was a brilliant discussion which was happening all over the world that this was the first and only war which could be considered as war of the chemists. Mustard gas, chlorine gas, and various other gases were used. And after the end of the First World War, there was a greater realization amongst the world powers that something needs to be done if we have to ban these types of weapons, which are not only a conventional or a symmetric weapon, but more than that, they belong to the category of a heinous weapons. To kill somebody by using a gas or to kill somebody by using a virus is definitely one of the most inhuman forms of warfare. And that's the reason in the year 1925, what is known as commonly now a Geneva Declaration that came into being. In those days, United Nations was not there, the League of Nations was there. They took a call when many countries joined hands together and they decided that there is a need to have certain amount of a legal structure which will ban usage of these weapons. Particularly in those days, the land warfare was the only form of warfare. The Wright brothers and the aviation industry came subsequently. So the declaration in those days was against the usage of poisonous gas into the land warfare. And to add to that, they had also added the viruses also along with it. So the understanding that people will use biology also for heinous purposes was there way back into 19th and 20th century early periods. As the systems progressed further, during early 60s, there was a declaration unilaterally done by the United States saying that biological weapons is one of the most heinous parts of warfare, and there is a need for the global community to join hands together and ban these weapons. This was the time when the idea of a biological weapons convention got mooted. But if I to slightly give a tangential argument as far as this history is concerned, I believe in those days, the power politics which was there in the United States of America was driven by the entire nuclear agenda. The people in power were a duo of Henry Kissinger and his boss was Nixon. So they realized that the nuclear weapons which are there with them will lose its shine if somebody develops a biological weapons as an alternative form of a deterrence. So in order to ban a emergence of an alternative form of a deterrence to their nuclear deterrence, because technically if you see, creation of a nuclear weapon is a very difficult task from technology point of view, as well as from getting all sorts of instruments which are required to develop that weapon. But creating a bioweapon per se is a relatively very easy task. So there was a thinking in the United States that point in time that if somebody creates a bioweapon, it would be a challenge to our nuclear deterrence. Hence, we should react immediately and ensure that production of these weapons will never happen. Maybe that was their geopolitics or that were their strategic considerations. But at end of the day, I can say that even their call of not allowing somebody to challenge their nuclear deterrence has helped humanity in certain fashions. At least there was a debate which started, and subsequently in the year 1972, the Biological Weapons Convention came into being. The Weapons Convention was put forward for various countries for the signatures in 1975, and since then, this has been one of the successful conventions as far as banning of the biological weapons are concerned. If we talk the chemical weapons, almost for 20 years, there was a discussion at various levels, different states, various multilateral platforms, and at a level of the United Nations also, that we need to have a treaty mechanism which will also ban the chemical weapons. So in the year 1991, finally, the treaty of banning of a chemical weapons came into being. If we really look at this today, that these are the two most important treaty mechanisms and the legal remedies which are available today as far as banning of biological weapons and chemical weapons are concerned. Both the treaties have played a very important role over a period of time. And even today, since we are talking of somebody using chemical or biological weapons, one must give certain amount of a credit to these treaty mechanisms that last 5 to 6 decades, at least nobody had dared to use these types of weapons because most of the countries in the world were bound by these treaties. Only recently we have seen in Syria theater, chemical weapons usage have become very prominent. Otherwise, for all these days, because of these treaties essentially, because these are legally binding mechanisms, none of these weapons were being used. However, if we compare both these treaty mechanisms, the treaty as far as chemical weapons is concerned is one of the most successful treaties because this treaty has got something what we call as a verification protocol. That means you got a verifiable mandate. The treaty itself can go and verify, go and undertake inspections into other countries in their chemical laboratories, so on and so forth. And it is a legally accepted position. If you see the the Chemical Weapons Convention has been governed by an organization called OPCW, Organization for Prevention of Chemical Weapons. Incidentally, this organization in the year 2013 got a Nobel Prize for Peace also. So this organization is mandated to ensure that no country gets into the business of chemical weapons. There are few countries which had chemical weapons with them, and there are few countries, rather there is only one country which is remaining, which is still having chemical weapons with them. But all these weapons are under the discretion and under the mandate of OPCW, and all these weapons, all those countries have agreed that they will destroy these weapons. So OPCW is looking after the destruction of all these weapons. So theoretically speaking, all countries who had declared that we have got chemical weapons Other than United States of America, no other country has got chemical weapons now because all those weapons have been destroyed under the supervision of OPCW. United States of America had made significant amount of investments in chemical weapons. So destruction is taking certain amount of a time. It may take another decade's time also, it appears, that they will require to destroy all their chemical weapons stockpile. So as far as chemical weapons are concerned, broadly speaking, the threat is minimized because of this convention. As far as biological weapons are concerned, the concern is of more genuine because the biological weapons convention is not a legally binding. That means there is no verification protocol which is available as far as biological weapons are there. But at the same time, none of the countries in the world have officially accepted also that they have got biological weapons. But now this brings to the focus of the era where it's not only the countries which are having these weapons, but now we are staying in the era of what we call asymmetric warfare, where what we call terrorist organizations or non-state actors, they are supposed to use these weapons and they are expected to use these weapons. And sure enough, they have used these weapons into the Syrian theater. That's what we have seen, that nobody is very sure that who has used chemical weapons in the Syrian theater, whether it is Syria, whether it is the other forces, or whether it is the asymmetric actors which are operating in Syria. So this brings into the foray the basic challenge, particularly in the 21st century, when we call this century as a century which is essentially been dominated by terrorism activities, that these two organizations, these two weapon conventions have got certain amount of limitations because you can use these weapons conventions only against the state actors. So if somebody misbehaves as a country, then you can sort out that country by using these conventions, by using these remedies. But how do you address the issues which are related with terrorism? I think that is what is going to be a major challenge in years to come. Particularly COVID-19 threat has really made all other countries very much aware that what sort of the nature of a threat could be there if somebody intentionally uses a virus as a weapon. Definitely, if you and me understand that terrorist organizations are also going to get a certain amount of understanding that yes, can they use this type of a weapon for their own uh, issues which they are trying to handle? Uh, the answer is both yes and no. The answer is no because as far as terrorist organizations are concerned, normally terrorist organizations fight for something. What we have seen as far as biological weapons are concerned, that you really don't know what sort of a trajectory a weapon can take. That means if I'm using a weapon on a particular set of people, it may impact my own sympathizers also. That is one of the reasons why it is said that even for all these days, terrorist organizations have stopped using these weapons, or they had never used these weapons. There are hardly one or two incidences where terrorist organizations have showed their interest into these weapons. But that doesn't stop us from thinking that no terrorist organization or there is a zero probability that nobody will ever use it. I think if a terrorist organization gets into the business of using these types of weapons, then only God can save us. So under these circumstances, we need to have certain amount of mechanisms which are not only legally binding mechanisms, but we have to look slightly differently and look at a global level where we will be able to address all these issues. There are a few other mechanisms which are available. I'm not getting into the details of it, but there is a Article 1540 under the United Nations. Then there's an Australia group which looks at issues with related with biological weapons, where you are got certain amount of rule mechanisms, how you share the data, how you share a certain amount of viruses and pathogens from one agency to other agency. Because as far as research in biotechnology is concerned, you just can't get away not by using pathogens. So even to create a vaccine, you require the same types of pathogens or a virus or a bacteria. So the research should not stop, but at the same time, these heinous elements which are there as far as warfare is concerned should not fall into the wrong hands. I think one of the major contribution of this conference would be is to educate to the policymakers that the threat is there. COVID-19 has showed us that threat is at the doorstep, and we need to think differently, and we really need to think out of the box to address these issues. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for putting those views in front of us. Thank you very much for your insights and very, very valid point that yes, with these conventions, we can actually keep some amount of control on the state actors. But what about the the terrorists and other organizations which are not part of this convention. Yes, sir, thank you very much for bringing many such important points. And now it is indeed my privilege to take the entire gathering to the next guest of honor. And it is indeed my honor and privilege to introduce him to all of you. Professor Francis Boyle, the Professor of International Law, University of Illinois College of Law, is the Professor of International Law at University of Illinois College of Law. Francis Boyle is a Professor of International Law at University of Illinois. He practiced tax and international tax with Bingham, Jena, and Gould. The Professor Boyle served as the counsel to Bosnia-Herzegovina and to the provisional government of the Palestine Authority. He also represents 2 associations of citizens within Bosnia and was involved in developing the idiomatic against the Serbians for the genocide crimes against the humanity and war crimes in the Bosnia and Herzegovina. He drafted the United States domestic implementing the legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapon Anti-Terrorism Act 1989, that was approved unanimously by both the houses of United States Congress and signed into a law by the President George H.W. Bush. Sir, it is indeed our honor and privilege to have you here in this conference. And without taking any time, I hand over the control to you. Over to you, sir. Sir, your mic is on mute. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. Namaste. Thank you very much for having me here today to speak to this outstanding group of peacemakers to which I've devoted the last 5 decades of my life. Just to review, yes, I did draft the U.S. domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, that was approved unanimously by both houses of the United States Congress and signed into law by President George H. Bush Sr. This was propelled by the fact that the Reagan administration and its neocons had gotten involved in the use of DNA genetic engineering techniques to research, develop, and test biological weapons. And I set out to stop this with the assistance of my friends at the Council for Responsible Genetics at that time, some of the top life scientists in the world from Harvard, MIT, Sloan Kettering, etc. So I've been involved in biological warfare work ever since the council asked me to get involved shortly after they were founded in 1983. Now, I've been on Indian television twice to discuss the coronavirus at the beginning of the pandemic, once with Indian CNN, is a very good session, and then a second time with an indigenous Indian TV station, once again, a very good session. And what I, on the basis of my research, have concluded is that the COVID-19 is an offensive biological warfare weapon that leaked out of the Wuhan BSL-4 in China. And we have to understand that this Wuhan BSL-4 is China's first Fort Detrick. Let me repeat that. This is China's first Fort Detrick. Just as you there in India have a BSL-4 there at Thun, this is India's first Fort Detrick. Let me repeat that. This is India's first Fort Detrick. Whatever they're telling you, It's Fort Detrick, it's the American Fort Detrick, it's the Indian Fort Detrick, it's the Chinese Fort Detrick, and we all know what goes on at Fort Detrick. They historically have researched, developed, tested, stockpiled, and sometimes used offensive biological warfare weapons, including and especially by means of DNA genetic engineering, and now by means of synthetic biology. And that is what I set out to stop with my Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989. This is what is confronting us here today. I am not a China basher. I am not a neoconservative. I am not a warmonger. But I believe under the circumstances of this global pandemic, I have to tell the truth about what happened here for all of us, citizens of humanity, to understand how to come to grips with this. We are literally, as one of your previous speakers suggested, fighting World War III here, not against China, but against COVID-19. It threatens all humanity. And as you saw, as I saw in the statistics yesterday, the highest level of infections in the world is the United States, followed by Brazil, followed by India. So this is a very serious struggle that we are engaged in here. Based on my scientific research, that I won't go through it all here, COVID-19 originated out of that Wuhan BSL-4 as a biological warfare weapon. It is basically SARS, and SARS is a weaponized version of coronavirus. It has leaked out of earlier Chinese biological warfare labs, and they reconstructed a synthetic recombinant virus for SARS, and then they brought it to a laboratory at the University of North Carolina, which is a BSL-3, Biosafety Lab 3. And indeed, all these biosafety labs 3 and 4, including the 4 there in India, have to be terminated immediately. They all leak. That's exactly what happened at the Wuhan BSL-4. I'm not saying China did this deliberately. It was a leak. Fort Detrick has leaked. All these BSL-4s leak. They are existentially dangerous, and they must be shut down, including India's Fort Detrick there at Boone. And the same is true for the BSL-3s. So the Wuhan BSL-4, and this is all documented in the scientific record. I have it here if you look at any of the interviews I've given on the internet, took this synthetic recombinant virus over to the University of North Carolina, which is a well-known biological warfare center here in the United States. It's not a BSL-4, but it is a BSL-3, and they do every type of hideous biological warfare work, Nazi biological warfare work that you can imagine. And they took it there for the purpose of applying gain-of-function technology to it, which means using DNA, genetic engineering, and synthetic biology. They would make it more lethal and more infectious. And indeed, involved in this research was not only the University of North Carolina, but the United States government's own Food and Drug Administration that has a long history of being involved in biological warfare. Likewise, my alma mater, Harvard, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at the Harvard Medical School, There's long been an overlap between cancer research and biological warfare development and the Wuhan BSL-4. She was involved, this Madame G. And they also acknowledge receiving cells from Fort Detrick. I'll repeat that. North Carolina was working with Wuhan BSL-4 and Fort Detrick on SARS, which is a weaponized coronavirus to begin with, and then brought, Ms. G, brought this technology back to the Wuhan BSL-4. In addition, as your courageous Indian scientists pointed out right at the very beginning of this pandemic, there is HIV that has been DNA genetically engineered directly into COVID-19. I read that study. It certainly convinced me. They had the pictures there. Of course, political pressure was applied to them to withdraw that study. But even later, the French microbiologist Savigny, who won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for determining that HIV causes AIDS, confirmed that study. And he said, yes, HIV is DNA genetically engineered right into COVID-19. How did the Wuhan BSL-4 get that? They sent a scientist down to Australia, and working with the Australian Health Board, they DNA genetically engineered HIV directly into SARS, which I have already explained is a weaponized coronavirus. So they brought that back to that technology to the Wuhan BSL-4. That can be confirmed by another scientific research paper that I have cited in my interviews on this matter. Indeed, if you doubt my analysis here, about a month ago, there was a report by the well-known Five Eyes Committee of Intelligence Services by the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain, that was leaked to the Australian Daily Telegraph, completely agreeing with my analysis that the COVID-19 came out of the Wuhan BSL-4, courtesy of the University of North Carolina and Australia, this Australian Health Board. That was published in the Australian news media, and I appeared live on Sky News in Australia, the next available opportunity for about 10 minutes to discuss this in Australia. The final piece of the puzzle, at least as I've been able to determine so far, and I'm certainly fully prepared to reevaluate my conclusions on the basis of further evidence, is that the Wuhan BSL-4 bragged on their website that they have successfully applied nanotechnology to viruses. Nanotechnology to viruses. What is nanotechnology good for when it comes to viruses? Aerosolizing them. That's what you do with nanotechnology. You aerosolize viruses and bacteria to be used as weapons, to be delivered by air, to be breathed by human beings. Aerosolization, Fort Detrick does it too. Aerosolization is always a tip-off of a biological warfare weapon. It serves no legitimate scientific or medical purpose at all. That is why at the Wuhan BSL-4, when they work there, they have to wear moon suits with their own portable air supplies. Likewise, that's what they do at the BSL-4 at Fort Detrick. This is what they do at the BSL-4 there in Poon. I've seen the pictures. Whatever nonsense they're telling you about what is going on there at Poon, this is India's Fort Detrick. India wants to play with the big boys, the United States and China and Russia. So they set up their own Fort Detrick, just as China, India, Russia, the United States all have. And despite the requirements of the Biological Weapons Convention. So in my assessment of the situation, this is what we are dealing with. And SARS, this is SARS on steroids. SARS has a lethality rate of somewhere around 14 to 15%, based upon the scientific literature. So this is SARS on steroids. This is what we are dealing with in India, in the United States, around the world. It's extremely infectious. It is highly lethal. It is very dangerous. Basically, humanity is fighting a World War III against COVID-19. It will kill millions if somehow we do not figure out collectively how to stop it. In the meantime, we have to shut down all these BSL-3s and BSL-4s, including India's BSL-4, because they will leak again. They all leak. That is what happened here in China. I believe the leak occurred, from as best as I can figure out from the public record, around the first week in November. It had nothing to do with the so-called wet market. This is just a cover-up and propaganda, again, by the Chinese government. They covered up and the SARS leak the first time. And as you know, maybe 1,200 people died. Finally, we were able to contain SARS. But this is gain of function SARS that has been aerosolized and has HIV in it. So it is far more dangerous. And, you know, I was on Indian TV the first time to explain this, twice before, to explain to India what you are up against there in India. And this then brings us, and so with all due respect to our previous speaker, and I mean that, the main problem here is not so-called terrorist organizations. The main problem has been terrorist governments like the United States, Russia, China, France, Israel, and now I regret to say India with your BSL-4. And you'll note in your BSL-4, they're running around there in moon suits with portable air supplies. So obviously they're trying to aerosolize whatever biological weapons they have there. We have seen then, because of the Reagan administration getting involved in applying DNA genetic engineering to biological weapons, which I tried to stop with my legislation, an offensive biological warfare weapons race that has been going on by the major industrial countries of the world: United States, Britain, China, France, Israel, and now I regret to report India is in this league. That is what is going on here. That is what we confront. In a long-term problem, all the BSL-3s and BSL-4s have to be shut down, including the one there at the, it will leak. There's no doubt about it. West Nile virus leaked here. from a Department of Agricultural Biowarfare Center there on Plum Island. It's afflicted all over the country. Lyme disease leaked also from that same Plum Island. There's a long history. Fort Detrick last summer, and they had to shut it down. Okay, so so it leaked probably around the first week in November. The first case, apparently, again, I'm just going by the public record, was reported about November 15th. At that point, I think the Chinese government realized there was a leak there, and they proceeded to lie about it and cover up about it, just like they did on SARS, just like the United States government has done on Fort Detrick and Plum Island and others. They all cover up on it because they know what they are doing violates the Biological Weapons Convention. So I'm not, singling China out. Indeed, there was a State Department delegation out at that Wuhan BSL-4. They were asking for American help to construct it, and the State Department came back, and you can read their report. It's reported in the Washington Times, saying that there were serious safety and technology problems at that BSL-4, at the Wuhan BSL-4. So it leaked. China covered it up. And here we are today. I think if they had acted immediately and effectively to shut down Wuhan, the moment they had notice about what was going on there and how dangerous it was, perhaps...
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have to keep some time in reserve for question and answers if possible. Thank you.
Sure. Let me just conclude that research was funded by the American National Institute of Health and the American NIAID, National Institute of Infectious Diseases under Fauci. They knew all about it. They funded it. That Wuhan BSL-4 was a WHO research lab. Imagine that, the WHO being a sponsor of Fort Detrick. And my alma mater, Harvard, was involved. They knew all about it. Their chemistry professor, chair, was over there, a specialist in nanotechnology. He worked for Fort Detrick. So what we're dealing here, is a cabal of Nazi biological warfare death scientists that do this type of work in all the advanced industrialized countries. Let me conclude then with, where we stand today. If, as the Indian scientists determined, and that was confirmed by the French Nobel Prize winner in medicine, HIV is DNA genetically engineered to COVID-19, which I agree is the case, then you are not going to be able to develop a vaccine. There is no vaccine today for HIV/AIDS, despite having tried to work on one for the last 3 decades. There is no vaccine. Personally, I don't think there will be a vaccine. I think the best we will be left with is therapeutics and drugs. Therapeutics and drugs have significantly reduced the death rate for HIV/AIDS, and it has significantly reduced the death rate for cancer. We've tried to find a vaccine for cancer for the last generation. It's failed. But the therapeutics and drugs have worked. And I respectfully recommend over there in India that you take your top scientists and put them to work at that, therapeutics and drugs. I believe these vaccines will be more dangerous than useless, but therapeutics and drugs is where you have to put your money. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for bringing in those important aspects. Thank you very much on behalf of Dr. Vishwanath Karade, MIT World Peace University. Thank you very much. And now it is indeed my honor and privilege to share with you that we have a very, very special person The next guest speaker of this session, the guest of honor of this session, Dr. Rajendra Shende. Of course, he doesn't need any introduction, but as a formality, I'll have to complete the formality. It is indeed my honor and privilege to introduce you to Dr. Rajendra Shende, Chairman of TERRE Policy Center and former diplomat to United Nations. As the global head of the Ozone Action Program in UNEP, Dr. Shende had signed the cooperative agreement with the organizations of Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in The Hague, whose mission is to implement the provisions of the Chemical Weapons Convention to achieve a world free of chemical weapons, and that chemistry is used for peace, progress, and prosperity. He had foreseen the possibility of some of the ozone depleting chemicals that could be stocked as chemical weapons. That possibility was seen as a threat by experts dealing with Chemical Weapons Treaty, CWC. He designed the first ever program in the world to prevent the illegal trade of such ozone depleting chemicals through training of the custom officers all over the world. That customs training program won the award from United Nations Environment Program. Sir, it is indeed our honor and privilege to have you here today with us. Without taking much time, I hand over the charge to you. Over to you, sir. So please, if you could please unmute your mic. Yeah, please go ahead. We can hear you now.
Yeah. Namaskar. Gautam ji, how much time I have? Hello? Can you hear me?
So we precisely have 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you very well. Namaskar again. And it is very good occasion to be here. I listened to the last scientist, very vibrant impression I had about this meeting. You heard what I am from Gautam ji, our anchor. Let me tell you what I am not first, so that I put myself in a right slot. I'm not a virologist, neither I'm a scientist. So I don't know much about the details and insights of the virus, and definitely not about various laboratories, what is happening there in the world. And I'm not going to take any names. But what I know of is what the world can do collectively about it, and what kind of mechanisms which are in place, which probably are legally binding, and to what extent the countries respect that legally binding treaties. Why I know them? Because I worked very closely in negotiating number of environmental treaties. Though I didn't work closely to get the biological weapon treaty or the chemical weapon treaty, but I worked very closely to get climate change treaty and the ozone layer depletion treaty called as a Montreal Protocol, and also with the Paris Climate Agreement. So that is where I come from. So let me start my presentation, and I hope I will be able to finish in 15 minutes. I have found that there are some things which we are unable to do anything about. Now that sounds like sort of shaming ourselves, embarrassing for such a powerful human brain, which says, I mean, like all of you, which says that there are some things in the world that we cannot do anything about. We are ready to launch a mission to Mars. We have started employing artificial intelligence. And we are even going beyond the Internet of Things and embracing Internet of Everything, where we will make hundreds of billions of machines talk to each other. And such a powerful human society. And I'm starting my presentation by saying that we have something about which the world cannot do anything about. We know it, that is a subject today, COVID-19. You're not able to do anything. And we are using the crude methods of putting a mask. keeping ourselves distancing, social distancing, and just keep on waiting for something to happen. You know what we are all waiting for. There is something more that we cannot do anything about. And that is, I think it is a president of United Nations Security Council recently said, and that is a president from Turkey who is recently elected. He said it is not only pandemic and epidemic, but it is infodemic. There is so much information that is being flowing from the scientists, from the technologists, from the vaccine developers, from the media, from the academia, and through such webinars. So much information that we first need a vaccine for the infodemics, and then probably wait till 2021 beginning for a real vaccine. Now, that brings me to what is called as even the powerful instrument that we have called United Nations, that is also not able to do anything about these two things, pandemic and infodemic. And let me give you a quick example. There is only one United Nations Security Council resolution which talks about getting together and do something collectively. But it is so vague that the country like France, who is also on United Nations Security Council, and the country which are part of the 10 non-permanent members, is trying to develop some kind of a resolution to be passed by Security Council to do something very, very concrete, collectively. That talks about investigation, that talks about getting together to develop the vaccine together, that talks about a vaccine should not be patented, and that also talks about making sure that the next pandemic doesn't happen. So what kind of preventive measures we can take? And that resolution draft is taking the round for 2 months. Even before the new 10 non-permanent members were elected, the draft was going on. And after the new 10 non-permanent members are elected, still we don't have anything coming to the United Nations Security Council for us to take action. And we know that the United Nations is the only platform in the world where people can talk in a collective way. The way we talked about sustainable development goals, the way we talked about saving the ozone layer, but that United Nations today seems to be lacking the leadership. We have the leadership. We have the leadership in scientists, politicians, academicians, but everybody is talking in a different way. And we don't have a common goal of moving ahead. Someone has said that India's population, that number 1.35 billion, doesn't represent the population. It represents the opinion. And watching today the infodemics, I feel that world has a population of 7.5 billion or 7.7 billion. And each one of them, they have a different opinion. How we came to that stage? That is because lack of leadership. And the present Secretary General of United Nations has clearly said that it is a shame. He did use the word shame, which was also used for the first time with the previous President of United Nations Security Council. That was from Estonia. And he said, it is a shame that we are unable to do anything collectively about it. Somebody says that virus escaped from the laboratory. Somebody says it is a biological weapon. Somebody says it just came from the bats. And where were those bats? Those bats were in a caves. The bats were in the market, whatever it may be. But we don't have a collective research on it. And the one reason for that is we never did any serious research on nature. We did research on space. We are ready to go to Mars. We did a research on atom. We know electronics. We have classified all the metals, non-metals, every element we did it. But we still don't know how the trees pump the water from the roots to about 350-meter high redwood tree. And this is the issue that we have forgotten to work for the nature. Let me come to the treaty which we are talking about, which is abbreviation is BWC, but its full name is sort of an scary. It is called as the Convention on Prohibition of Development, Production, Stockpiling of Bacteriological and toxin weapons and on their destruction. That is the full name of that convention, which we refer to as Biological Weapon Convention. And it is different from Chemical Weapons Convention, which is called as a CWC. So you have BWC, you have CWC. BWC recently in March 26 completed 45 years of its existence, and it has 183 states as a parties. Must mention that all the developed countries are parties to it. There are only 10 states which are neither signed or not ratified this treaty. And we have about 9 of them from Africa, then 3 of them from Pacific Island. And one important who has not signed it is Israel. Let's keep the politics apart. What it says is, it is overwhelmingly signed and ratified treaty, but it has been ineffective. And the reason is, yes, what it says is the development, stockpiling, acquisition, and retention and production of biological agents and toxins of all types are prevented from everything. Like there is a word called prophylactic, protective, and peaceful purposes are eliminated from this. And prophylactic is a probably Oxford Dictionary word, which simply means preventive. So if at all that biological agent or toxin is used for prevention, protection, and for peaceful purposes, its use is permitted. So look, it says that only those biological agents and toxins which are developed for destruction purposes are banned. It's very difficult to prove that. We have umpteen examples where the country can justify anything, and human brain works very well in that. You can always say that particular biological agent is used for research purposes, development purposes, and it is used for predicting the next pandemic. Even the toxins, some of the toxins can be used by researchers for advancing our knowledge, so-called advancing of the knowledge. But we don't want to advance our knowledge in researching the nature. And hence, it is a legally binding, just like chemical weapons convention. It is legally binding, but it's extremely difficult to prove if somebody complains about neighbor or any other country who is using it for the destruction purpose. And hence, it does use as a sort of what is called as a sort of a retrieval or deterrent for anybody to take action. But anybody who is adventurous is extremely difficult to stop that person or that country. Now, BWC operates from Geneva. It has offices in London, Moscow, and Washington. Chemical Weapon Convention operates from The Hague. And The problem is that the developed country do not seem to take peace conventions seriously until they are attacked. The typical example is Iraq. But if somebody else gets attacked, let's say African country gets attacked due to Ebola or due to Zika or due to any other virus, and if they say that it is coming from somewhere, it is unlikely that they will take notice of it. That is one of the reasons, because some of the powerful countries and the United Nations Security Council is nothing but a power council. 10 non-permanent members probably can guide these 5 permanent members in thinking in a right way, but they are unlikely to take notice of it. This is exactly what happened with the United Nations Security Council resolution, which I talked in the beginning. That particular draft was made by France, which is a permanent member of UN Security Council, and one more member, Tunisia, which is one of the 10 non-permanent members. Now look, nobody wants from other countries in permanent members of United Nations Security Council want to join them. And that draft is just hanging. So when I talked about leadership, I'm not talking about United Nations leadership. I'm talking about leadership from the countries. And I feel that what happened on 6th, and that is my last part of my speech or by my keynote address, I would like to say that 17th June, the date on which India was elected as a non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council, that could prove to be a turning point. Remember when India was not there in a Security Council, not as a non-permanent member, India had taken up an issue with United Nations Security Council, even as a general member. And they said that we should collectively come together and do something about it. Each and every person on this earth, on this planet is getting affected. And if United Nations Security Council cannot do anything about it, then it's really a shame. And now I hope that we come together with Indian leadership. And I hope that this conflict between the 2 powerful nations on United Nations Security Council probably will see the light of the day, and other countries like France and Britain can probably take note of some of the good non-permanent members of United Nations Security Council to make sure that we go in the right track. Because remember, this is not going to be the last pandemic. Some of the pandemics are already on. We have forgotten them. HIV and AIDS is still on. And we have some other pandemics, they are still on. And probably this one more will get added to it and some more will join. We are in absolutely serious problem of not only locust plague, not only COVID-19, not only on climate change issues which are going to come up, not only water crisis, but we are facing unparalleled challenges, and only game in the world is United Nations Security Council. And I hope the leadership of our Prime Minister Narendra Modi will take this opportunity and make this United Nations Security Council probably see some of the good directions to go on. And on that issue, I close my topic. I hope I finished in about 15-16 minutes, and I'm open for any questions and answers, which probably will be more useful than one directional speech from me. Thank you very much, and thanks for giving this forum, this particular forum, podium to me, and also thank to Dr. Vishwanath Karad, who has really visionary power to take this particular such kind of webinar, which are not just related to education, not just related to peace, not just related to science, but it is related to, and he goes beyond and crosses the boundaries always and talks about spirituality, the sustainable development. And I think that kind of leadership at our level is also necessary. Thank you.
I'm
Thank you, sir.
grateful, Shende sir. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, 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 namaste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much indeed for your words of wisdom. And it is indeed my pleasure to take you forward to the next guest of honor of this session, Colonel G.H.R. Naidu ji. And it is indeed my honor and privilege to introduce him to all of you. Honorable Colonel G.H.R. Naidu, the veteran chief consultant at CBRNE, Secure India, former chief CW inspector, Organization of Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and former member of the International Civil Service. My friends, he was commissioned to the from the Indian Military Academy into the Corps of Combat Engineers in 1974. A civil engineer, management and security professional with 45 years of rich experience, out of which 8 years international in the field of combat engineering, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear and explosive, that is CBRNE defense, security and disaster management, and counter ID operations. He is a qualified CBRN and counter ID professional. He led teams of international professionals on the large number of verification missions to the various member countries to verify the inventory of chemical weapons and monitor their destruction. He lost many hours operating in heavily contaminated environments that are CW destruction facilities around the globe. He is the chief consultant with the CBRNE Secure India, a knowledge center and the forum for bringing the awareness in the general public, government, security agencies, and corporate entities on the threats arising from the use of CBRNE material and their dangerous consequences. No other person can be more suited for this session than you, sir. It is indeed our honor and privilege to have you here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
You may please address the gathering now.
Yeah, the presentation to be loaded.
Yes, it is quite visible now, and you're audible.
Yeah, my presentation is not loaded yet. Yeah, okay. Good. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have the disadvantage of being the last speaker. So obviously, most of you must be tired mentally of last 2 hour sessions. So I understand the liability. And also, I'm going to speak to you on world free of chemical weapons. So some of the earlier speakers have not given a very bright picture of this so-called weapon of mass destruction. And also, I'm not very sure in the earlier sessions whether any introduction has been made regarding what are chemical weapons and what are the effects of chemical weapons on human beings. So I suppose that some introduction has been given by some of the speakers for the last 4 days. And also I've seen the earlier speaker, Group Captain Ajay Lele, making passing references to the Chemical Weapons Convention and also the success of this first international disarmament treaty. I'll try and stick to my timing of 15 minutes. I promise you that. Coming to the next slide. Yeah, the genesis for chemical disarmament then goes back to 1675. When France and Germany tried to reach an agreement on use of these poisonous weapons. And then something happened in Brussels Convention and the Hague International Peace Conference. The world was taking it very lightly till the First World War, when chemical weapons were used in a very massive scale in Belgium, and more than 100,000 people got killed and millions become casualties. So then came the Geneva Protocol of 1925, which talks about prohibition of the use of asphyxiating, poisonous, and other gases, and also bacteriological methods of warfare. But the drawback with this, it does not, however, prohibit the development, production, and possession of chemical weapons. So Geneva Protocol has got its deficiencies or drawbacks. Yeah. Now comes the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1963. A lot of 20 years of deliberations and in the disarmament conference on disarmament. And finally, they come out with a very wonderful convention called the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993. It's for prohibition of the development, production, stockpiling, and use of chemical weapons, and also calls for the destruction. Whereas the Geneva Convention is not all that comprehensive. It was signed in January 1993 in Paris, and it reaffirms the principles and objectives of the Geneva Protocol of 1925. It came into it entered into force on 29th April of 1997, when 65 nations have signed and ratified this convention. As I speak to you today, I'm happy to announce that 193 out of 197 countries have signed and also ratified the treaty. The 4 countries which are left out is one is Israel, which has signed the convention but not ratified, and 3 other nations, Egypt, North Korea, and South Sudan. Now, this convention protects roughly 98% of the world population, something fantastic. And the treaty controls chemicals which are classified as Schedule 1 to 3, and also certain discrete organic chemicals. The unique features of this convention is, firstly, it provides for a very stringent verification regime. Unlike all other disarmament treaties, like say, the Biological Weapons Convention, it lacks the verification regime. The Chemical Weapons Convention has got a very stringent verification regime, and it provides for challenge inspections in case of non-compliance concerns raised by any of the member states. So no notice inspection could be launched against countries which are reported to be not complying with their obligations under the convention. And thirdly, very important, it also has provisions to investigate alleged use of chemical weapons by one country against other, both to the signatory states. Now, to implement this Chemical Weapons Convention, as Group Captain Ajay Lele has already mentioned, that OPCW, that is the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, was formed in The Hague, the so-called International Peace City in the Netherlands. Yeah. Now, what does the total elimination of chemical weapon entail? What does it entail? We talk totally eliminated. So firstly, the member states submitting accurate declarations on the stockpiles which are held by them. Then destruction of these total chemical stockpiles under the verification regime of the OPCW. Then destruction of total equipment on manufacturing facilities which make these toxic chemical, and non-proliferation, basically controlling on chemicals or toxic chemicals or their precursors, which are of dual use. They could be used for making chemical weapons, but they are also used for peaceful purposes. So non-proliferation is an important aspect when you talk about elimination of chemical weapons. Then there's also provision for assistance and protection for those countries which are participating in the convention. If some country is attacked with chemical weapons, then the organization is on duty to help this country, assist it, and protect it from the effects of the chemical weapons. And lastly, cooperation in the field of chemistry for common good of the humanity. We can't stop the development of chemistry, so development of chemistry goes on, but as long as that development doesn't impinge on the Chemical Weapons Convention, it's a welcome step. Now, the role of organization of OPCW, very briefly, is firstly to achieve the objectives and purposes of the Chemical Weapons Convention 1993, implementation provisions including verification of compliance, and it's a forum for consultation and cooperation between the state parties. If there is a dispute, if there is a disagreement, this is a forum where the disagreeing parties are called and try and resolve. The issues are resolved. So it's a forum for consultation and cooperation between state parties. And now, since 2014, after the Syrian issue, it also supports counter-chemical terrorism efforts, basically in the form of fact-finding missions or rapid response verification missions. So in case there is a chemical attack by non-state players. Quickly in the organization, like I mentioned to you, 193 countries form what is called the Conference of State Parties. It's akin to the General Assembly of the United Nations. We have an Executive Council of 41 members, like Security Council of the United Nations. And we have a technical secretariat, like the UN Secretariat at both in New York and Geneva or Vienna. And it's got roughly about 500 staff, and it includes 200 inspectors of chemical weapons specialists, chemical production technologists, chemical production logisticians, and industrial chemists who go on to the sites and verify those chemical weapons or those chemicals which are declared by the member states. And as was mentioned earlier by Group Captain Lele, this organization, for its sterling role in chemical disarmament, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize 2013 for successfully implementing the CWC. Now, what are the objectives of Chemical Weapons Convention? That is, firstly, demilitarization. When we say demilitarization, it is destroying of all chemical weapons and the chemical weapons production facilities. When I say PF, it's production facilities. You see the picture of chemical weapons here on the screen. Then second is non-proliferation, basically to regulate and verify chemical industry making dual-use toxic chemicals or precursors. So like I mentioned earlier, you can't restrict development of chemistry. You can't restrict chemicals being used for peaceful purposes. So therefore, an important objective of the CWC was to prevent non-proliferation or prevent proliferation, I would say. Then assistance and protection, I did mention to you. So those countries who are attacked by chemical weapons, they will be assisted by the organization and the international community, and they will be provided due protection. And lastly, next is international cooperation in the field of chemistry, national implementation, and universality of the convention, that is, try and encourage more countries to join CWC. Now, for lack of time, I will just cover first two aspects, that is demilitarization. What you see here is a picture of the chemical weapons, a chemical weapons destruction facility, especially on an island called Johnston Atoll in the middle of the Pacific, where I had the privilege of being there for about 10 weeks, continuously monitoring the destruction of the US chemical weapons. The most important obligation, like I mentioned to you earlier, is the destruction of all CW. What includes CW is the chemical warfare agents, filled or unfilled chemical ammunitions, and old and abandoned chemical weapons. When we talk about old chemical weapons, any chemical weapon which is prior to 1925 is treated as old chemical weapons, or any chemical weapons between 1925 and 1946, if it is still not in a functional state, are also treated as old chemical weapons. And abandoned chemical weapons are those weapons which one country and abundance in other country, like you have an example of Japan, while they are leaving China in the mid 1930s, have left millions of chemical weapons in the territory of China. So Japan is here in an abandoning state party, and China is a territorial state party here. And the most expensive and time-consuming aspect of the implementation of the convention is it's a very expensive thing. It costs a lot of rupees for destruction of 1 gram of chemical warfare agent and a very strict verification regime of the OPCW. Then destruction has to be carried out at a highly specialized facility. You see here a facility here, under continuous monitoring by the OPCW staff, and keeping in mind the safety and environmental protection. This is demilitarization. Now coming to the success story of achievements of demilitarization. Now out of a declared 72,304 tons of chemical warfare agent, as of December 2018, 70,545 tons, that is 97.51% of the chemical warfare agent been destroyed. And overall, the chemical ammunitions which are used for delivery of the chemical warfare agents, here's a figure here, 96.64% for category 1 chemical weapons, and 100% for category 2 and category 3. Now, when I say category 1 is where the schedule 1 chemical is there, and in category 2 is the not schedule 2 chemicals, and category 3 is empty ammunitions. Now, you see here, chemical weapons production facilities, 14 countries have declared, 97 facilities, and all have been deactivated. If you see the remarks here, 97 production facilities declared have either been destroyed or converted for peaceful purposes. So 97 accounted for. Chemical weapon destruction facilities, as the destruction progress, we decommission the destruction facilities. So there were about 39 destruction facilities. There were about 47 storage facilities. And there were 24 sites where the abandoned chemical weapons were there. And about 6 sites where the old chemical weapons were there. So total, the OPCW carried out this number of inspections since the entry into force. So as you see here, it's a great success story as far as the chemical weapons is concerned. Now coming to the non-proliferation. Now, when I talk non-proliferation, we talked about the chemical industry. These are the necessary measures to ensure that toxic chemicals and their precursors are only developed, produced, otherwise acquired, retained, transferred, or used within its territory or any other place under its jurisdiction or control for the purposes not prohibited under this convention. So you can't use it for any purposes which is prohibited under the convention. So it is used, it can be used for purposes not prohibited. So it's a very important aspect, that's non-proliferation. Now let's see the success story in the non-proliferation aspect. Yeah. See, we have schedule 1 chemicals. We have 18 toxic chemicals are scheduled in the schedule 1 and 4 precursors. So roughly about 12 of them. We have 26 facilities. These are basically single small scale facilities which are allowed under the convention for the purposes of research, for the purpose of training on protection, and for medical aspects. So there are 26 such small scale facilities with small production capacities and very small quantities of chemicals. So there are 26 of these, and 316 inspections were carried out since entry into the force. You have the schedule 2 chemicals, which are 3 toxic chemicals and 11 precursors, 212 facilities worldwide. These are all inspectable on a regular basis. Then the schedule 3 chemicals, which has 4 toxic chemicals and 13 precursors, have 353 facilities around the globe. And lastly, the other chemicals, including the discrete organic chemicals, phosphorus, sulfur, and fluorine content chemicals, which are roughly about 4,265. So you see the effort which has gone in from the OPCW. It's entirely a success story. Unlike what I heard from some of the speakers earlier today, it's not very that gloomy as it was projected. It's a very great, first international disarmament treaty to be successful. Now we are only left out of 70,000 tons or 72,000 of chemical warfare agent. We are only left with roughly about 1,800 chemical warfare agent. That too with the United States, which has promised to destroy under the convention by September 2023. They have already got 2 extensions of 10 years. So by 2023 September, hopefully the world will be free of chemical weapons. So that brings me to the end of my talk. I hope I've stuck to my time frame. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Dr. Vishwanath Karad. I happened to meet him in year 2006 in his office. I still remember him. I was highly impressed with his setup. And also the other organizers. This is a great opportunity you've given me. A short time is short, 15 minutes, and I try to do my best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Actually, we should thank you that you joined us and you shared some of your great thoughts and information with us. Thank you very much for that, sir. Indeed, our privilege to have all the speakers, those who have joined us in the last 4 days. And with this, we are coming towards the end of this session and this conference in turn. But as our beloved founder, Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad sir was sharing, it is time that we all come together and take some vow and decide something and declare something as a conclusion of this conference. And to share that thought with us, we have the Professor Parimal Sudhakar, from the MIT School of Government. I request him to take the things forward. Over to you, sir.
Good evening to all the dignitaries and participants of the valedictory session of this conference. I am going to read out Pune Declaration of 4-day International Conference on Eradication of Biological and Chemical Weapons. We, the delegates, comprising of scholars, thinkers, academicians, scientists, and social scientists, participating in the 4-day International Conference for Eradication of Biological and Chemical Weapons, organized from 23rd to 26th June 2020 on World Wide Web, on the background of the ongoing pandemic of coronavirus COVID-19, would like to give a clarion call to the United Nations organization to play a significant role in making our world free of weapons of mass destruction, in particular biological and chemical weapons, to save humanity and prevent the world from complete destruction, and solemnly declare that the august body United Nations Organization, under the leadership of its Secretary General, should convey a meeting of the members of the United Nations Security Council and the World Health Organization to urge them for complete disarmament of the huge stockpile of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons of mass destruction, as well as ban any further research and development in the same. It is incumbent upon us, the scholars, thinkers, scientists, academicians, social activists, and other concerned citizens of the world to take proactive action to persuade the heads of nations to act wisely in the interest of humanity, to protect the human race and bring humanity together and coexist, as said in the ancient text of wisdom, the Rig Veda, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world as one family. The world today is facing an unprecedented pandemic of COVID-19, which is threatening the very existence of humanity with a very real fear that humanity may not even see the end of the 21st century. The world today is sitting on a massive stockpile of nuclear weapons, hydrogen bombs, neutron bombs, and other chemical as well as biological weapons of mass destruction that have the capacity to destroy the earth more than 1,000 times over. The world needs to recognize that the coronavirus that is threatening to completely destroy humanity is a man-made virus created with the malefied intention of causing large-scale destruction and disruption of the economy, as well as the well-being of every living being of this world. The coronavirus has the potential to teach us what the unthinkable might look like. We sincerely hope that in our solidarity through this crisis, we will certainly realize that we can transcend over our entrenched divisions to pursue our highest collective aspirations to promote the culture of peace and develop a peace-loving, holistic global society. The United Nations organization needs to realize that the conventions for biological and chemical weapons call for prohibiting development, production, and stockpiling weapons with origins in any form of biological and or chemical materials or toxins, and needs to implement this clause in its letter and spirit. I would like to mention that this 7th point was mentioned by today's one of speakers, Advocate Mathur, and it will be further refined. The declaration is signed by Reverend Professor Dr. Vishwanath G. Karad, Founder President, MIT World Peace University, Pune, Rajendra Shende, Chairman, TERRE Policy Center, and Rahul V. Karad, Executive President, MIT World Peace University, Pune. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Over to Darshan Mundaraji. Sir, you're mute.
Sorry.
Darshanji? Yeah. Please
Hello,
go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I was asked to give the concluding pledge, and from that perspective, I'm going to actually reiterate the words of Revered Professor Dr. Vishwanath D. Karad, sir, which he uttered in Utah, Salt Lake City. He said I would like to earnestly appeal to all my friends, well-wishers, my colleagues and student friends to extend their full cooperation and support in our noble mission of establishing world peace through friendship and fellowship as enunciated in Atharva Veda. It was this paragraph that Sir had translated which got him a standing ovation in Sauralagita, and I repeat and quote him. It should be visible on your screens. Tech team, can we have it on the screens, please? The fellowship. I will read while they bring it up. Yes, fellowship. And I'm going to read it, and I urge you all to read it with me loudly so that you can hear it even if your mics are on mute. It's worth reading and hearing your own words. So let us pledge for this fellowship. We are the birds of the same nest. We may wear different skins. We may speak different languages. We may believe in different religions. We may belong to different cultures. Yet we share the same home, Earth. Born on the same planet, covered by the same skies, gazing at the same stars, breathing the same air. We must learn to progress together or miserably perish together. For a person can live individually, but can only survive collectively. Let us take a pledge in the name of all the saints, sages, seers, and scientists of the world. Let us pray for the well-being of the entire humanity and pledge to rededicate ourselves to the work together, wholeheartedly for the noble cause of harmony and world peace, and to promote the culture of peace through value-based universal education system based on the saying of Swami Vivekananda, which is also the motto of MIT World Peace University. Union of science and religion, oblique spirituality will alone bring harmony and peace to the mankind. As articulated by Revered Professor Dr. Vishwanath D. Karad sir. I think this is the perfect message for the 4 days of convening, bring us together to continue this fellowship and really push ahead for the cause of our own well-being, securing the future of the life of our own children. Thank you once again for your deliberations and participation. Thank you. Over
Thank
to
you. Thank you very much, Darshanji. Over to Professor Milind Pandey. Sir, you're on mute. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Darshan. Good evening, my friends. Outcome of this 4-day international virtual conference on eradication of biological and chemical weapons to raise the awareness amongst the society, students, universities, corporates, political leadership, and PMO office. This virtual conference brought the countries together to evolve a mechanism which should end the threat of bio-warfare by taking a socio-political-legal discourses toward curbing the research and development of bioweapons and occurrences of biochemical warfare. As you know, my friends, because of this horrifying corona pandemic, which is rapidly developing global health emergency, places unprecedented strain on our medical, economics, and social systems. My friends, time has come to work hard to prevent new risks for instability, unrest, and conflict. As we said, this was the MIT WPU effort in association with MIT School of Government, Bharatiya Chhatra Samsad, and UNESCO to awaken the youth globally to the dangers of such biohazards, which should be condemned with an intent of consolidating the message of safe and secure manner. Would like to salute the founder, president, UNESCO chair, Professor Dr. Vishwanath D. Karad sir, and executive president Rahul Karad sir for this timely taken up initiative of awareness through this virtual conference. I would like to conclude with a short Hindi poem. And that is most apt for this 4-day international conference. वक्त कम है जितना दम है लगा दो. वक्त कम है जितना दम है लगा दो. कुछ लोगों को हम जगाते हैं, कुछ लोगों को आप जगा दो. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone in the panel and everyone in the audience as well for being there with us for the last 4 days. And every session witnessed 400, about audience, and which is amazing, and which is very, very encouraging and promising that yes, we all are heading into the right direction. Thank you very much, everyone, once again. And before we close this conference with the concluding remark, I would like to request the Pro Vice Chancellor of MIT World Peace University, Group Captain DP Apte, to kindly propose the vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
It's indeed my honor to propose a vote of thanks to this valedictory session of 4 days international conference on eradication of biological and chemical weapons. Today's valedictory session was really the pinnacle of this 4 days international conference. These were the thought leaders and the best speeches and making us to think and actually shake us from our chairs, the way it was come up in the valedictory session. Maybe over last 3 days or 3.5 days, with more than 50 speakers and esteemed speakers, who has developed our information and knowledge to such a level that today's valedictory session was really charged and a befitting manner. I would like to propose a vote of thanks to Advocate Anand Mathur, and he has talked about very interesting points and important points, so that we have to finally include some portion of his speech in our draft declaration also. I also propose a vote of thanks to Group Captain Dr. Ajay Lele and Professor Francis A. Boyle. In fact, Professor Francis Boyle has completely turned his discussions upside down, because whatever we are talking so far and whatever he started, and it was really shock to the many of the people, because he came with the scientific proof, he came with the details, and he came with how this has started and what we should do it. And it was really eye-opener for all of us. Then I propose a vote of thanks to Dr. Shende. I had heard him earlier also in his simple style, but for actually hitting the bullseye, what you call it in military, he exactly hit the nail on the head and brought out the real points, the ground reality of what is happening, particularly in the climate and other issues where international fora is unable to do up to a certain extent. Then I propose a vote of thanks to Colonel Naidu. In fact, it was on the other side of the story. He told the success story of where we could actually reach almost 100% success in chemical weapons. And that gave a hope that if we continue in this fashion, I'm sure that we will reach in the other biological weapon, as well as the last one could be a nuclear weapon. They will come to the same way and be this particular earth as a mother earth, as a very peaceful, and which is a dream of Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad. So I propose a vote of thanks to Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad, sir, our revered founder president. And he's always talking about, for last, at least I have heard about 20 years, he's talking about when I joined his institute, he's talking about the world peace, and he's firm believer that India will show the path of peace to the mankind in this particular century. And I'm seeing that we are really moving in that direction. 20 years back, I was wondering whether really all people will come together. But now the world is changing, the people are coming, and the COVID has given probably earth-shaking experience to entire world in developed as well as other countries. I also propose a vote of thanks to our executive president, Mr. Rahul Karad. He actually conceptualized this particular process, how the conference will take place and who are all will be coming. And it's a 4 days conference was his idea. And he guided us and motivated us to push through this particular place. I also propose a vote of thanks to our Vice Chancellor, Professor N.T. Rao, that he always guided the way it should be, quietly, remaining behind the scene. But he always guided us and motivated us to move in that direction. Now, as far as this particular conference, 4 days conference, I won't be reading all the names. There are more than 50 speakers, thought leaders who have participated in this. If I start reading 50 names, it will take another 5 minutes, and therefore I leave it to that. It will be definitely will be circulated. Many of us you would be knowing in any case. I also propose thanks to a great team which has actually worked for success of this particular conference, 4 days conference. Although it looked one session for each those who participated, however, behind that, the machinery of about 50 people were working from morning to night, and actually over the night also. Even after midnight also, we have been getting calls and done things, sending the emails, because it was not a simple thing. Getting the people all over the India and world, people who are connected for every session, they have to be informed and motivated to join and log in. I won't take any particular name of these names of the people who work. Again, there will be 50 plus, and somebody should not be left out, right? From the person who is actually working on computer and getting the things done, till the persons who are doing other social media and promotion. So I sincerely thank from my bottom of my heart to the entire team, and with this MIT World Peace University, MIT School of Government, and our MIT group, I'm sure that we'll be doing it something path-breaking for future times to come. Thank you very much. God bless. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for proposing vote of thanks. And with that, we have reached the end of this 4-day international conference. Thank you very much. But before we conclude, let us join our hearts and let's sing together the universal anthem for Saidan. Of course, in this format, we'll have to play it digitally. So I request my technical team to kindly relay the Saidan.
विश्वात्मके देवे येने वाग्यज्ञे तोषावे तोषोन्मजजावे पसाय दानहे जे खळान्ति व्यङ्कटी साण्डो कर्मी रतिवाढ भूता परस्परे पडो मैत्र जीवांचे दुरिताचे तिमिरदा विश्वस्वधर्म सूर्ये पाहो जो देवांशील तो तेलाहो प्राणी जात वर्षत सकळ मंगळी ईश्वर निष्ठांची मांदियाळी अनवरत भूमंडळी भेट तू भूता चला कल्पतरूंचे आरव चेतना चिंतामणीचे गाव बोलते जे अर्णव पियुषाचे चंद्रमे जे अनांतन मार्तंड देता पहिन ते सर्वाही सदा सज्जन सोय रे हो तू किंबहुना सर्व सुखी पूर्ण होनिसिही लोकी भजिजो आदि पुरुषी अखंडित आणि ग्रंथोपजीविये विशेषी लोकीये दृष्टादृष्ट विजये हो आवे येथ म्हणे श्री विश्वेश्वराव हा होईल दान पसाव येणे वरे ज्ञान देवो सुखिया
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in and supporting this very thought, this very endeavor of 4-day international conference on eradication of biological and chemical weapons. Thank you very much for joining in, and hope to see your hands joining us for such noble cause in the future as well. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself. Good night.